want to share with you today the Bookends pacing system. It's a system for pacing with chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, recovery that I think is just amazing and awesome and simple, super simple, but really, really effective. Now, pacing for me was such a huge part of my own ME/CFS full recovery. Now, throughout my recovery, I never figured out how to avoid crashes entirely, but I definitely came to appreciate that this path of just pushing as hard as I possibly could and then crashing, taking a couple steps backwards, or maybe a whole bunch of steps backwards, and then having to start all over again, really wasn't getting me anywhere. I really had to think carefully about energy conservation and about using what energy that I had to very much focus on recovery. So this bookend system is a very simple way to think about how we use our energy.
Do people even buy actual physical books anymore? I know I don't. For those of you that might not be aware, back in the olden days, we used to buy actual physical hard paper books. This was the only option that we had. And when we were done with these books, we would store them on shelves indefinitely for no apparent reason other than to say, look at me, everybody, I read. And we would need things called bookends that we would put on the shelf to keep the books in place and upright.
So it was actually a dear friend of mine, Katie Howard, who got me thinking about this. So she needs full credit for the bookend system. I'm sure she will trademark it soon. But she was telling me about how, because she also has ME/CFS and she is in the process of recovery and she is doing fantastic. She was actually on my gaslighting video, if you recall. If you've seen that, that's Katie. And she was telling me about how she was going to something that was going to be mentally draining for her, and she was going to be careful not to put those activity bookends onto either side of it that we usually do in life. And I thought, what a great way to think about this. Like, we really do pack things together with more activity on either side quite often, or more draining things. And with ME/CFS, that is just really impossible. So I thought, what if we're thinking about self-care bookends put onto everything that we do? What if there is a recovery bookend before and after every draining activity that we have, whether it's just something that's physically demanding or something that's mentally demanding of us? And when I was thinking about this, the pacing bookends or the self-care bookends, I had an interview coming up that day, and I wish I could say that I was relaxed and chill about interviews, but I get really stressed out. I put a ton of pressure on myself. They are just like probably like running a marathon for me, just how taxing it is on my body. I spend days preparing. I write pages and pages and pages of notes, and then I don't like that feeling of how much power that 1 hour or however long it is talking with a stranger has to determine your future. So they take so much out of me. And I was thinking, what kind of bookends am I putting on either side of this? I really just had it set up where I would finish my interview and then go into, I don't know, making dinner or doing laundry or doing whatever else I would normally do that day. And I thought, this is going to take a lot out of me. With my ME/CFS recovery, even though I do consider myself fully recovered, I've very much come to appreciate that many of the things I did to recover, I have to keep doing now. So you would think that a lot of this would just go, like, why do I need pacing strategies anymore? And I'm coming to appreciate that I very much do. And it was the lack of these skills and these habits and abilities before I got sick that I suspect contributed to my getting as sick as I did in the first place. Now, I'm not saying that it was my fault, but I was definitely running myself in the ground and had virtually zero self-care skills. So I think that if I'm not careful, if I don't keep all of this stuff up, I could get myself back in trouble again. And thinking about the pacing bookends or the self-care bookends for everything that we do just really resonates with my experience of what worked for me to recover. Because for me, it was so much of it was about planning. It was about having a plan to my days and having a conscious approach to everything that I did. So in a way, it's like scheduling. But when you're doing that scheduling, looking at the bookends around those activities that are coming up that you know are going to take a lot out of you. So whether it's going to a doctor's appointment or taking a shower or visiting with your in-laws or whatever it is, wherever you are in your journey and whatever you're able to do, I imagine we all have things, either physically or mentally, that we know are coming up, that we could be taking better care of ourselves. We could be doing things beforehand. So for example, for my interview, when I started thinking about my bookends, I decided that I would do some guided meditation in the hour leading up to the interview. Because I knew my mind would just be going and I'd be staring at the clock and counting down and worrying about if I was going to get everything right and staring at my notes for the 1,000th time and trying to memorize things. And I knew I needed something to just really calm the stress response in my body. And I felt for me that guided meditation would be the best thing. And then after my interview, I knew I'd be buzzing with adrenaline and just kind of bouncing off the walls, and that, that really exhausted, tired, but wired feeling. And I know that it's in those moments that I have a tendency to self-soothe in unhealthy ways. So I'm coming down off the stress, I'm relieved it's over, and I want some junk food, or I want a glass of wine, or something that in the long run isn't really going to help me that much. So I promised myself that as soon as the interview was done, that I would just go for a slow, gentle walk. I knew that getting outside, getting into nature, being a little bit physical but not doing anything too demanding would help me get rid of some of that nervous energy, calm my mind, connect with nature, reduce my stress, and get back into a good place. So I had those bookends in place on either side. My friend Kayla, that I interviewed on my channel a while back, also shared a story about how when she had things coming up in her life, she also is working to recover from ME/CFS, and she gave the example of a birthday party. And she would stress and stress and stress and worry, and then by the time it was time to leave for that party, she was already done, like just so exhausted, because she would worry, how am I going to get through it? Is there going to be the right kind of food? Am I going to have the energy? Is it going to be too loud? Am I going to have a place to sit down, and so forth? So before she even went out the door, she was done. And I suspect that many of us can relate to that. So by putting those bookends in place, perhaps if we have something like this coming up, we put something before it where we just relax and we distract our mind. So maybe it's laying down and binge watching a Netflix special, or just doing something that will keep our stress down and our mind occupied. And then the bookend after the birthday party, set a timer, set an alarm at that birthday party. That's another piece of advice, because otherwise it's almost guaranteed you're going to overstay. When that alarm goes, you go. And then when you get home, you've already decided what your bookend's going to be. So that bookend might be that you are ordering takeout instead of cooking your own food, or you are taking a long hot bath if that relaxes you. And depending on where you are in your recovery journey, it's going to determine, I think, how big or small those self-care bookends need to be. So if you are feeling mostly recovered, quite strong, quite energetic, maybe you only need a 30-minute bookend on either end of these taxing activities. But if you are still struggling quite a bit physically, you might need a 5-hour bookend or a 3-day bookend on either side. So perhaps when you have that activity coming up, you've planned that for 3 days afterward, you're going to get your food delivered or only eat leftovers from the freezer, and you will have no visitors, very few obligations during that time. And you will perhaps double up or triple up your meditation during that time to give you that extra recovery and stress reduction. Perhaps you set timers and limit the amount of time that you spend responding to people on social media because you find that draining. Or perhaps during those bookends, you cut it out entirely. And these things don't have to be about going out. They don't have to be about physical things. It might just be that you have a visitor coming and you know that that's going to leave you drained after. It's going to use up a lot of your energy. So you're going to have to bookend it with something to minimize the impact that this is having on your health. And sometimes you might actually suddenly find yourself in a situation that is physically or mentally taxing, but you didn't see it coming. So you can't do that first bookend, that time is gone, but you can start thinking about your recovery bookend on the other end of this. So someone pops by for a visit, somebody that you find emotionally draining, and you know that after you're going to be wiped out. So as soon as you get that emotional vampire out of your space, what's that recovery bookend going to be? For me, recovery was all about skills, information, strategies, just having different things in my toolbox that help me take control of my life and take control of my healing. And I love this strategy. I love it now. Now, everything that's coming up, I'm in the habit of asking myself, how am I going to bookend this? It's just routine now. And I think it's so important. And I can't believe that I went through so many years of my life not thinking this way. So there you go. If this is something that resonates for you, sounds like it could work for you in your life, then it's one more tool that you have to help you take control of your time and your recovery and how you're feeling. So just identifying those mentally and physically taxing activities in your life and always thinking about how you're going to bookend them. How are you going to take care of yourself? How are you going to do some damage control on these things that are coming up? So I'd love to hear what you think. Is this similar to something you do already? Does this make sense? Does it sound feasible? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you found this helpful, if you could give it a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate that. And of course, subscribe and share the video if you think someone else might appreciate it. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are all doing well, and I will see you next week.